Hello everyone, welcome back. Over my years of learning, playing, and teaching guitar, I've come across a number of recurring myths. So today we're looking at the biggest myths about learning guitar. But before we get into it, it's that time of year again, that time of year that I absolutely dreaded when I was a kid, back to school time. But that also means a back to school sale over at my course platform, samuraiguitartheory.com. Over there, I have 4 courses that dive deep into the system that I use for making music. The Rudiments and Beyond the Basics teach theory for the guitarist from the ground up. Pentatonic Mastery is a short course focused on everyone's favorite 5-note scale. And the Craft of Soloing teaches how you can tell musical stories through your solos. For a limited time, everything is half off with promo code BACKTOSCHOOL21. You can find more at samuraiguitartheory.com. I'll also put up links in the description. Now let's get to those myths. Myth number 1, I'm too old to learn music. Truth being, no sir, no you are not. Of course you've got to set realistic goals, but you can absolutely find a way to have a lot of fun making music no matter what age you start at. Having said that, there are some hurdles I found that older students often deal with. For those of us in adulthood, it's harder to find time for things like guitar because, responsibilities, something that kids and teenagers just don't have as much of. Adults also have a tendency to be stuck in their ways. If you've never played an instrument before, it requires a unique type of thinking. You gotta be able to let your guard down and access parts of your brain you may have never used before. Kids don't seem to care about this, whereas adults can find it off-putting. But ultimately, music can be started at any age. I've taught numerous adults who were complete beginners who went on to accomplish their goals and more. Moving on to myth number 2, children need music lessons. I've known numerous families that have a policy where the kids need to learn an instrument because the parents heard that music is good for the developing brain. However, it's incredibly detrimental to force a child to play an instrument if they don't want to. A long, healthy relationship with music can bring countless benefits into someone's life. The last thing you want to do is ruin that relationship by turning it into a chore. Let your kids find music on their own. Please don't force them into it. Myth number 3, you need to read sheet music well. I've heard it said that you should be able to read sheet music as well as you can read a book. But this is very much dependent on instrument and genre. As a guitar player who has worked mostly under the pop, blues, and rock umbrella, I've personally never had a gig that required me to read standard notation. Now don't get me wrong, it's going to be very beneficial to have a strong understanding of how standard notation works, and you really should be able to read a chord chart, but unless you're working in the jazz, classical music, cruise ship musician, music theater type realms, your practice time is probably better spent elsewhere than mastering sight reading. Next up, myth number 4. Beginners should start on acoustic. When I used to work in a guitar store, I met many parents and new students alike who had this in their head. Totally untrue, an electric guitar actually uses lighter strings, which makes it easier to play for the beginner's soft, uncalloused fingers. The versatility of the sounds and the ability to amplify also makes it much more fun in those early stages. I feel like this myth started because parents didn't want to buy a guitar and an amp, so they would just get their kids to play an acoustic. Unless you really want to play an acoustic guitar, I recommend starting on an electric. Myth number 5, learning music is way too expensive. So many of the greatest musicians became great on a shoestring budget, and in today's world, there are even more options to do so. You can rent an instrument for cheap from almost any music store, and there's a wealth of information available free online that was never there before. The one thing that I would recommend spending some money on is a good teacher. Which brings me to myth number 6. You can learn everything online. Nothing can replace being in the same room and playing with somebody who's better than you. A good teacher provides this and more. Jamming with friends, playing gigs will show you things that you can't possibly learn on the internet. Things like YouTube videos, apps, courses like mine are all great additional resources that should absolutely be used, but nothing can replace making music with others. Myth number 7. Practice makes perfect. Practice by itself does not make perfect. Proper, efficient practicing does. One of the most important things you can learn is how to practice, how to utilize your time so that you're actively improving and not just meaninglessly spinning your wheels. For the most part, you want to be working on things that are just outside of your comfort zone until you can nail them. When your comfort zone has then grown, you repeat, growing your skills bit by bit. You also need to make sure that there's direction in your practice so that your effort is feeding into the bigger things that you want to accomplish. If you have a rough idea of where you want to go, you won't waste time on things that aren't taking you there. Myth number 8, you are tone deaf. You'd be surprised at how many people think they are, but truly being unable to differentiate between pitches is an incredibly uncommon ailment. more than likely you've just never spent any time training your ear. Myth number 9, you should practice at least blank amount of time every day. There are ways to learn things in 15 minutes, but there are also ways to get absolutely nowhere in an hour. Like I said before, it's how you use your time that's important. Myth number 10, only the best are successful. If we're talking about making money playing music, after a certain level of competency on your instrument, there are serious diminishing returns between getting better and your value as a professional. Every time the guy who is reliable, fun to hang out with, and good enough is getting the job over the unreliable jerk who is more talented. Myth number 11, talent is a gift. Though people say this in good nature, when people tell me I'm gifted, I kind of get annoyed. The only person who gave me a gift was my parents, who paid for my guitar lessons and my rental guitar back in the day. If you saw me at age 13, nobody would have been able to pick me out from any other beginner guitarist as somebody who could have a career playing music. The only thing that I did different was play guitar in a somewhat obsessive manner for 20 years. Sure, there are some people out there who have more of a natural inclination than others, but the less talented hard worker will always surpass the more talented lazy guy. Myth number 12, music theory limits creativity. Couldn't be further from the truth. Music theory shows us expectations, not rules. How one decides to play into that expectation or not is entirely up to the creativity of the individual. If you learn theory, you get to skip over countless hours of trial and error that will lead you to the same answers as if you had just learned it in the first place. Instead of wasting your time trying to figure out what might sound harmonious, you get to spend your time making creative decisions with what you already know. Myth number 13, my favorite guitarist didn't blank, so I won't either. An example of this might be Jimi Hendrix didn't do ear training. I want to sound like Jimmy, so I won't do ear training either. You gotta remember that these guys did the bulk of their learning by listening and dissecting so much music. If you can do that, but also do the things that expedite the process, you will be a significantly better musician than if you didn't. Everyone learns and creates in a different way. Just because something wasn't learned by one person doesn't mean it won't be incredibly beneficial for you. Myth number 14, you can't do that. Let's say that I'm a medical student and I'm learning how to remove a gallbladder, which I believe is somewhere in that vicinity. And in my training surgery, I start cutting into the patient's skull. I would hope that my instructor would say, you can't do that. There's nothing like this in music. You can do whatever you want to do as long as it sounds good to you. Some teachers might try to impose their taste upon you, and certain common tendencies will appeal to a broader audience than other musical choices, but ultimately, you can do anything you want. And finally, myth number 15, if I can just learn to blank, I will be happy. Listen, it's great to have goals to keep you moving in a direction, but by the time you've got to the top of one hill, you'll see another one that's bigger, and you want to climb even more sitting there on the horizon. Most of us never truly find satisfaction, no matter how far we've come, even if we always think we're just one step away. But that's kind of the beauty of it. You can dedicate your entire life to an instrument and only scratch the surface, which keeps it interesting as long as you're on the journey. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the biggest myths about learning guitar. Remember that everything over at my course platform is half off for a limited time if you use promo code BACKTOSCHOOL21. Over there, I offer a deep dive into the system I use for making music. Everything is professionally animated to make the tough stuff easy to understand, and each course has supplementary material to keep you interested. You can find more at samuraiguitartheory.com. Thank you all for watching. If you want to check out another video like this one, hit that link up there. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for a wide range of musical content. Until next time, look after each other, look after yourselves, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.